Hello and welcome to the Racers HQ podcast. I'm your host, Matt Murphy, and joining me on the line tonight, we have our dedicated co-host, Pat Mulry. How you doing tonight, Pat?
I'm doing great, Matt. Super excited to be back on the pod after quite a sabbatical.
Quite the sabbatical. No pod fade here, bro.
No way.
No way. And then a returning special guest, Chris Mooring. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. So tonight we're going to talk about the Houston race. Yeah, catch up a little bit. We haven't done a pod in a while, but Chris and I went down to the Lemons race down in Houston. So recap that. Unfortunately, Pat couldn't make it. But before we get started, Pat, I don't know. It looks like you had some apple juice or something there. What are you drinking tonight?
I do have some juice tonight. This is the adult juice. What choice was this tonight? Boy, I just poured it. It hasn't had that much of an effect. It's just
it's some good juice.
just the memory fade. I don't think this is Knob Creek. It was next to the Knob Creek in the cabinet. Okay. That's what it is. That's why it threw me off. This is it's called Desert Colt, but it was formerly known as it's not the uncut the UCUF uncut unfiltered from what's that Nevada distillery in Las Vegas, and it used to be called like Son of Uncut or whatever it was, and they changed it now to Desert Colt.
Is it
all right?
Smoke Wagon by chance?
Yeah, Smoke Wagon. That's how
I was going to say. They do cool holiday bottles. I have quite a few of them for all the glow in the dark Halloween ones and other fun stuff.
Yeah. So this is Desert Colt.
Nice.
Quite tasty.
Yeah, I think you got me one of those Smoke Wagon things one time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, appreciate you. It was good. Chris, you sipping on anything tonight?
I've just got some water. It's a work day, unfortunately.
Yeah, same. I've been chilling lately. Anyway, so glad somebody's having fun. All right, well, let's get back into the pod here. Yeah, we've been gone for a while, but now we're back. I think the last we heard, Pat was preparing to go to Houston, but since then we had a few hiccups. So, Pat, why don't you just give us a quick garage talk summary of how life's been for a while?
The travails of Miku. So for any new listeners who've stumbled upon this podcast, like because I got free time on the computer in prison or something like that, Miku is our 1995 BMW 2-door 3 Series car. That's our race car. And at Hallett in May, we were running lean and kind of melted a cylinder head on practice on Friday, and that put us out of that race. So we got the engine redone, rebuilt it, started, and that went really pretty cleanly. Clean process, getting the old one out, getting the new one, getting it rebuilt, put back in. But through the middle of the summer, and thought we were going to be in really good shape for the race. And as I was testing it, I couldn't get it to. It would run, it would start, it would run, but it was always lean. And so then I start wondering, is my air fuel meter, is that off? Are we seeing correlation on that between like the factory narrow bands? And so, and trying not to hurt it in the process of understanding what's going on, just driving it kind of up and down the street nearby, and then looking at data and trying to figure it out. And just couldn't get it really to stop running lean. Went through pretty much all of the hardware on it to make sure, sent the injectors out, sent them to Matt Murphy, who had them clean. Yeah, that's you, by somebody or other up there, and got them back. So we know those are in, good shape. They're all, within like a percentage or something of each other. And so we shouldn't have an injector, running lean problem, and kind of just went through the whole thing. Not a hardware side, started jacking with it on the, it's just a factory ECU, but we have it hacked open. And, Ben kind of doing remote, suggesting, I guess. We'd be on the phone out in the driveway, and I've got the laptop hooked up to the ECU in the car. And then, we'd look at I'd run some data and call him back and pull the data, and we'd look at it, and we'd try and jack around with a little bit more. And we started just throwing, extra fuel at the base map just to see, like, can we get this out of stupid lean condition, like, in the 20s, like, which is so far above what we want it to be. That's under, a very low, no load condition, but even like at wide open throttle, it was still above 14.7. And I'm like, this is not what we want at all. Like, we can't do this. So we started throwing fuel at the base map and got it to the point where it was, in the low 14s or high 13s, like at wide open throttle, but it was still, not running lean. It was still running lean. And I was like, we can keep doing this, but this isn't really how we need to do this by throwing all this fuel at the base map. Like, something's not right. We could do it, but we'll wind up, gassing down the oil at some point because we'll be running so rich when we're at part throttle or idle, and we'll, just wreck the motor some other way, or we'll get it so rich that we can run it at wide open throttle, but we can barely get the car to start and run at idle. Right. So, and we kept going through testing, and we finally came to the conclusion that we got something really borked in the rewire process when we were switching over from the old chassis to the new one and doing the wire harness for that. Something somewhere isn't right. And we're kind of right now we're trying to continue to diagnose that and get that solved. So
all right.
We're maybe 50-50 to make it to Atlanta. Probably not as good as 50-50 at this point. But we'll see. It kind of depends on what happens between, this coming weekend and the end of next weekend, the weekend before Thanksgiving, I guess, will really kind of be the make or break. If I can get a couple things that we need to be able to try and test it and work it out better, then we might make Atlanta, but I wouldn't make any non-refundable reservations at this point, certainly, So, which is a shame because it drives so nicely. It frankly, it really runs great. If I didn't know from looking at the data that we were running really lean, I wouldn't know that we're running lean. But looking at the data, it's very clear, and it's correlated between the wideband and the information, like the voltages that we see changing on the narrow band. So,
well, bummer, man.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're narrowing down the problem, and we see you back out there at Hallett, I guess.
Yeah, if we can't get it for Atlanta, that's the case. I can't make it to Barber this year, so I think we'll, it might be Hallett and then Hallett. It's really too bad. I think about, the years where we were able to do 4 or 5 races in the MR2 or even, the BMW, and that is not the case right now. Hopefully we'll get back to that stage.
We'll get that back
at some point. Yeah.
Teething problems for
That's right.
8 years. Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, I haven't been getting much done. I did a lot of travel, and then went and hung out with Chris right after that down in Houston. I did add some a booming system to my SUV, and I'll tell you, man, that is lovely. It's just like a warm hug of sub bass, and like you just get to go re-listen to all the old music. Like, it's just great. Anyway, hearing things I've never heard before. The Humpty Dance is just killer, Anyway, so highly recommend.
How does that song go?
That's how the bass line goes. But yeah, so I could sing the song. That's not what we're here for, guys. I don't want to get take down notice because I'm singing copyrighted material.
You can only sing 5.9 seconds at a time.
Right. That's right. But no, that's been about it. But highly recommend it. It is a lot of annoying wiring. Like, I took the entire interior out of my truck and put it back together. But oh well.
So you've exchanged great sub bass for unexplained rattles.
Oh yeah, no, it's good. It's great. Yeah, and the eventual just destruction of my truck in some way, I'm sure.
So did you dynamite the inside of all the door panels and stuff too while you're at it?
I didn't bother doing any of that.
None of that while we're in there.
No.
Creep.
No. Anyway, so that's all I got though for now. Miata's getting ready for ST4, ST5. We'll see next year at NASA. So really want to go do some of that. All right, well, let's move on to the.
Oh, are you gonna? Well, hey, while we're on Miata though, are you gonna try and kick it off like first race of the year in January? Or are you gonna wait a bit?
Well, I saw that they're doing ECR in January. I was gonna skip because it'd be in Houston.
It always has been.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna make it to January if I'm being honest. But somewhere in the early fall or spring. I mean, early spring. So we'll get there. Awesome. Hopefully get Roland out there. That's my other goal in life is to get Roland out NASA racing. So we'll see.
For what it's worth, I think that's Roland's goal too.
Yeah, good. Well, they align. Okay, now let us move on to the main part of our pod. Okay, Chris, last time we had you on the pod, we had just gotten back from Houston, and you were champion of the world, IoT winner, after crab walking home, a 14-hour drive in your new to you 929, formerly the throw the batteries in the ocean car. So, since then, I think you've been working on the car. You probably had to go find the other 929 that was in the country and steal some parts off of it. But we'd like to kind of hear from you, hear your journey from that last race. Don't have to take too long, but just, what kind of trials and tribulations did you have to go through to get back on track? And then I think we want to hear about the race that we just got back from. So how you been doing, Chris?
It's been a lot of fun. Running a 929 in Lemons is definitely the epitome of 90s Japanese reliability, for sure.
Yeah.
If you remember from last year, we cooked the whole rear spindle because we had the bearing and axle that was one rust welded unit, so that was definitely not coming apart there. So I had to scour the internet, went through a couple different junkyard pages to try and find 929s, which those second gen 929s didn't sell well. So there were two of them in the country. One was in Arkansas, the other one was in California. So I made the trek up to Arkansas. I think it was about a 6-hour drive, give or take, each way. And the worst part about that drive was I got to the pick and pull yard. I gave them the car I was looking for, and they literally looked me in the face and said, "Yeah, we don't have that in our system."
Oh no.
It was one of those moments where I was like, "This is not a great start to the fun trip up to Arkansas." But I kept pulling up the website. I was like, "I swear, like it says y'all have it. Please just let me go out there. I'll pay my $2, whatever." Walk out on the yard. The maroon 929 was completely untouched. Well, that's not true. Somebody went in and stole the speakers out of it, which, if you're that person running around in Arkansas with Mazda 929 speakers, you're a man of culture. But yeah, I had to. In terms of the suspension, everything on that car was completely untouched. Now, it wasn't in the best of shape. It had clearly been out there for a while, and then I had to rig up a wonderful system of dragging it all the way up to the front in the gravel, which consisted of using some car mats from cars nearby, and then a bunch of seat belts to make some straps to basically drag it the couple thousand feet up to the front. I got like about halfway there, and some nice gentleman saw me struggling and was like, "I'm going to give you a hand." And the two of us.
Was this the whole car or just the rear end?
Just the rear end, which on that car is a nightmare because, again, it's got 37 control arms on each side. So every time you'd go to drag it, one of them would dig into the ground. So that's why we used the mats and everything. And it was definitely an endeavor. I'm glad that Pick and Pull did not charge me for the seat belts or mats, just for the rear end of that car, which I had to explain was a rear end when they're like, "No, there's control arms on it. This is definitely a front end." And I was like, "Yeah, but there's a big differential in it." I was like, "I swear it's a rear end of the car. I'll take you out there if you don't believe me." But was able to convince them that it was a rear end, which worked out well because the bearings and axles in that car did in fact come apart, which was the big issue we had last year. So after acquiring the rear end, I had a buddy who speaks Japanese get on a parts site for me and type me up an email that I could send over because they sold Mazda Cosmo parts, which the Cosmo was the fun, basically 929. Yeah, they had the 20B with the twin turbos, like really nice car that Japan got with a manual transmission, which we got none of. We were able to find one singular rear control arm for the car, which ultimately ended up going on the car. But yeah, outside of that, it was funny because we sent an email, we got a quote back. It was like $140 after the exchange rate, which I know Japan's economy is making it 929 parts somewhat affordable right now, which
Yeah.
if you can find them, because as soon as we placed that order and we got a tracking number, they pulled all the parts off the website. They did not have anything listed anymore.
Oh, really?
I think they probably realized, they're like, this person ordered one part to America. Chances are they're going to order more. But regardless, we got the one control arm, which I was very happy to swap out. For the rest of the control arms, anything that was serviceable, they got the treatment of cutting the boots off, replacing all the grease in there, making sure that they were not full of any junk. And then for any of the bushings, which definitely the subframe bushings that were a little worn, we used some 3M urethane window weld, which I will say is not the end all be all to make bushings out of. But if you have a bushing that's on its way out, there's enough research on the internet that it's a semi decent bushing material. So yeah, we tried to fix up any of the bushings that were a little torn, or some of the subframe bushings, which don't see a lot of stress.
Do you leave the torn bushing in there and then you just hit it with the window weld? Is that how that works? Or do you just replace it all with window weld?
So I was trying to save what all was still attached. I did my best job of trying to rough up the edges with like a little bit of Brillo sandpaper to try and give it its best fighting chance of all sticking together and being somewhat cohesive. But for the most part, there is some old bushing that is holding everything kind of centric and everything, and then just 3M window weld to kind of fill in the gaps after trying to prep it the best we could. But that was kind of the suspension repair. And then in terms of the axles, I had zero faith in the bearings and axles in there, so I took both rear bearings, or both rear spindles. We had new bearings pressed into them. I took it to a shop, even though I have a press. Didn't have enough faith and didn't also want to run the risk of cooking another bearing. So we had new bearings put in. We had, apparently you can get axles for the car, and they were pretty clean units. I was very impressed that I ordered them and they showed up within a week. They were a little expensive. It was about $200 an axle, but I think that's kind of going rate for CV axles on like decently heavy cars. But yeah, after that, rear end was all back together. Did the best to try and align the rear suspension by trying to line everything up. I will say the one thing that I said I would do last year on the pod, and I did do it, and I very much so appreciate it. Said I was going to buy the owner's manual for this car, or at least the workshop manual, which came in a 6-pack, because I had like 2 wiring diagrams, a body diagram, and then the super thick, like couple thousand-page workshop manual, which literally had all of the torque specs, told you how to take stuff apart, which I will say half the time angle grinder came out because they would tell you light taps with a hammer, and you're literally like, sir, I took an 8-pound sledge to this thing and it didn't budge. Regardless, it definitely was nice to see how the car should have been put together, because that's what we went to when we put it back together.
Right.
But yeah, that was, I would say, majority of what we had to do before the race was just fixing all of the issues with last year, and then after that, it was just throwing in some fresh belts and tidying up some of the car. We did put a slight modification to the paint job, but it was same thing, just some new stickers to kind of replace some of the tape where we had lost some decals.
You know, I wonder if that's a like more of a Japanese manufacturer thing than it is a American or European manufacturer thing. We had the greatest factory service manual when we were running the MR2. It's called the BGB, Big Green Book. Everybody in the MR2 community knew exactly what it was, and it was fantastic. It's like it sounds like what you're saying about for that car. Every part, every specification, every part number, how it should go together, how it should come apart, the torque specs, everything. And you know, we've got a Bentley manual for the BMW, but it really isn't as. I mean, it's good, but it's not as good as the Toyota service manual was for the MR2.
Yeah.
Do you have one of those for the Miata, Murphy?
Yeah, well, I built that custom one where I took the Miata and the K Miata and all my other custom like shocks and stuff. And so whenever they would have specs for like the motor, I used the Miata manual as the base of everything, and then I just delete out all the motor pages and insert the motor pages from the 2010 Acura service manual. So I'm just kind of stitching together all of these different service manuals. But yeah, I got all that.
And the factory service manual on the Miatas, more like the one for the MR2 then, huh? Like really thorough.
Oh yeah, it's very thorough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of pages. It's like infinity pages, but luckily all of it's available online, like that one and the one for the Honda. And maybe eventually I'll print it all out and put it in like a, sleeves or something, I was thinking like print it two-sided and put those sleeves, but anyway, we'll see.
That'd be a lot of sleeves.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was thinking I could make notes, go back, edit them.
Yeah, that's true.
Save it, and then whatever. We'll see.
Yeah, the problem with an infinity number of pages is every time you think you're getting closer to the end, you're not.
You're never getting to the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could talk about the
same thing with the beginning. You don't even know where to start.
Yeah. We could talk about the amped up topic distribution of theoretical numbers if you want to.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. Because it's like there are infinity of them, but the density of them within the infinity is different.
Yeah, that's true. I'm in the middle of one of the podcasts I listen to is called Acquired. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it basically talks about the history of companies. And the one I'm listening to right now is about Renaissance Technologies, which is actually an investment firm founded by mathematicians.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I know about math, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, no, math nerds are great, aren't they? Yeah.
They are.
I've been reading the Black Swan series. It's like,
oh, really?
Yeah, and it's changed my life.
Has it?
So
how so? How's it changed your life?
Oh, just thinking about nonlinearities and like this, like where you can find like big opportunities for wins and where you can avoid big opportunities for loss and other approaches to life. But it's a lot of philosophy and math and stuff like that. It's great.
Does it recommend staying away from auto racing?
Yeah,
because it seems like it's really, we've all experienced a very big opportunity. We've realized a very big opportunity for loss through auto racing.
Yeah, but I think with this, it's not as scalable, right? Like there's auto racing and then there's like, toying with the financial markets.
Mm-hmm.
So, or like running cybersecurity for a giant insurance company or, things like that.
Once we win one of those really big money prizes in Lemons, we'll turn that around to manipulate a financial market. How about that?
I gotcha. Can't wait. All right, we digress. Chris, I'm so sorry that happened. I don't even know how that happened, but here we're back. Whew. I think we were getting to the race though. So awesome job getting the car ready. I like your focused approach. You're like, we got to fix this rear end. That's pretty much it. Let's just get the car back on track. I mean, that thing was a beast, for the, aside from that wheel bearing, the thing just kept running for the whole race last time. And, spoiler alert, it did pretty good this time. So you want to kind of tell us about the race and maybe some of your experiences? Maybe start with practice. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely can. One thing I did forget, we did also change the oil and put spark plugs in it, but outside of that, we didn't really touch anything under the hood because Mazda 929, the JEZE V6 is a pretty stout motor. But yeah, outside of that, we did not rip off the exhaust this year when backing out of the trailer. We did that later in the weekend. In terms of test and tune, it honestly went kind of smoothly. We were running 3 semi-used tires that we had ran on last year and then one new tire to replace the one that got chewed up from the wheel bearing because I did not feel safe putting anyone on the track with that. But they were your standard, I think they were the RS4s. They were the standard nicer tire that a lot of teams run in Lemons, and then we had fresh tires for the actual race. But in terms of the car, it was running as well as it normally does, which it basically means you are the transmission in an automatic. So on like Diamond's Edge, you're downshifting into low and running the car in S the entire track. You can shift up into drive when you're on the front straight where it's you can actually open up a little bit and you're possibly getting to 3 digits on the speedometer. Yeah, it does fly, but yeah, I would say test and tune went pretty smooth. There wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. It
You had some starter issues, didn't you? You had a couple bugs there to fix.
So the car has this wonderful issue where every 1 in 25 times you go to press the starter, or at least this is what we had last year. It's every 1 in 25 times the starter will just click. And normally when your starter clicks, it means that your starter's on the way out and you hit it with a hammer and it magically fixes itself. Well, the car came with the starter, like a used starter with the car, and the box was a Bosch starter. So we did end up swapping the starter to an AutoZone starter and realized that the Bosch starter that was in the car was better than the AutoZone starter, which you kind of...
Wait, the used one in the car was better than the new in box starter?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is classic. Yeah. The replacement starters are not good.
Right.
I mean, the Bosch, you want to just rebuild the Bosch or buy a, $300 rebuilt Bosch. But
yeah. I will say, though, if you think about it, the market for Mazda 929 parts is not really that much of a thing. So, like, that starter could have been built 15 years ago and sat on the AutoZone distribution shelf since basically it was built, and it's probably gotten dropped half a dozen times, maybe pulled by accident. Who knows? But, yes, we ended up putting the Bosch starter that was in the car that had the intermittent starter issue back in the car. And then we started to take a look at the wiring system that was in the car, where we had paint on one of the battery terminals. And this was something that Eric was a pro at, was willing to take a look and kind of help us figure out what all was going on with the wiring system, because we had paint in one of the battery terminals, and then you kind of work your way up to the engine where there's two wires that are they were connected in a way that should have been fine. It was basically two lugs.
They were two legs with a bolt through.
Yes, which in theory would be okay if the lugs were properly crimped onto the wires, because Eric took apart the electrical tape and he literally just goes, "Well, I think I found your problem," and just pulls it apart with the lugs all attached to one side. Which
Eric didn't even have his seatbelt off yet, and he's under the car. He came ready to party.
Yeah, that was one of those moments where I kind of looked at the car and I was just like, man, there's a lot of stuff on this car that I don't even know what happened, or what the plan was. Like, there's certain things I do know, like why the rear end has some fun panel gaps and stuff like that. But some of the wiring in that car, I look at sometimes and it's just like, wow, this is fun for sure.
It may have been fixing an emergency in some other race, I mean, there's going to be a lot of abuse like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and temporary repairs become very permanent out of convenience. Don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of that. But after we got the starter back on the car, I would say we put the starter back in and charged up the battery, and it seemed to have kind of solved most of the issues. After that, I think we rolled the car through BS and Tech, where Judge Sajeev got what I think, and not to toot my own horn, but I haven't seen him post a lot of people on his Instagram for their bribes. But
oh dang,
yeah, he did post the bribe that we gave him, which was a custom 3D printed Brutalist chess set. So Sajeev's a big fan of Brutalist.
Oh, that is solid.
Yeah, it was. I will say the chess set, I could have just printed it and threw it in the box, but because the chess set that I got had little magnets in it, I took the time to drill holes in all the bottoms, transfer over the magnets, put the little felt pads on the bottom, and everything nested perfectly in the little folding case as well. So it was chef's kiss. I showed up with a box of a chess set, and you're just like, okay, you bought this on Amazon for $10. And then we opened it up, and I was like, Sajeev, these are Brutalist chess pieces printed just for you. I would have made them out of concrete, but then they would have weighed 30 pounds. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, I think I did a good job. And he was very excited, which I will say, I think that was probably one of the high points of Test and Tune, was just going through BS and Tech with that. Because the car itself, it ran relatively fine. There wasn't anything to report outside of the intermittent starter issues, which I don't think we've still fixed. But hey, I mean, it still runs. So after that, we had a relatively uneventful Friday night. We put tires on the car, put brakes on the car.
Did we have to do any exhaust work Friday, or was that?
So I don't think we did any
Or was that
exhaust work
Saturday?
Friday, which we probably should have because, yeah, in terms of the exhaust, we had an exhaust leak over the course of the weekend.
Mhm.
And the ironic part is the exhaust that we ripped off last year is still beautifully attached to the car after my 3 hours of booger welding last Friday, or last year's Friday, where we welded back in a piece to replace the cat. But the other exhaust had a little bit of an exhaust leak right after where the hollowed out cat met the rest of the pipe. And it was something that we recognized it was leaking. It seemed like it was relatively sturdy enough to keep running, so that was ultimately the plan. Did that bite us down the road? Potentially. But ultimately was something that we probably should have put a little bit more attention into, just preventative, put it back up, weld it, throw extra weld, more weld.
Yeah, I think the story was that the exhaust pipe was kind of just welded to the case of the like cat. Like it wasn't like pipe to pipe. It was like metal that was under there to exhaust pipe. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, the welding on this car, really nice exhaust, by the way, because the car used to have one singular exhaust pipe, now has dual, or had dual exhaust. But they there was no flex in any of the tubes, and exactly as Matt said, where the rest of the exhaust pipe welded up to what was left of the cat, they, I guess, welded to the heat shield as opposed to welding to the actual pipe that came out of the cat, which your mileage may vary. It lasted however long. I mean, we drove with it all last year and
Yeah, I guess
half
so.
of this year. So I mean that shows that it could be done, but
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend.
Yeah. So that's cool. So yeah, it was a pretty uneventful Friday night. Seemed like pretty chill, good vibes. And then yeah, did you have any concerns going into the race, or were you ready to get after it?
To be honest, I was definitely a lot more nervous last year than this year. But if you remember from last year, we spent most of Friday night beating the heck out of the
Oh
axle,
yeah.
trying to get that apart. So like I went into the race last year on like not a lot of sleep versus this year I got my full six or so hours of sleep, which it definitely get your rest, hydrate before you get in a car. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, Saturday I went out there, a little bit of nerves for the first couple laps, and then after you're out there for a little bit, it kind of just all subsides after you see your first couple cars get carted off the track at Lemons. It kind of becomes second nature. I wasn't pulling super fast lap times, to be honest. I'm usually the slowest guy in the team. However, that's okay. But yeah, in terms of that, I think my fastest from Saturday morning was maybe like a 125, which the car can do a lot faster, and we've seen it.
225.
Or sorry, 225. Yeah, 125. That would be fantastic. No, 225.
Yeah,
Which
did you body swap a GT3 on slicks for the 929?
honestly,
That might get you to a 125 at Houston.
yeah. Maybe we just take the Mazda V6, put it in a motorcycle chassis, and then it's majority 929. Like we
That's
could do
right.
it. But yeah, it was I think I went first, and then after me was Todd, and then we
Yeah.
had Matt,
Me.
and then Josh was our last driver on Saturday. And for the most part, the pit stops were, as pit stops with a factory fuel system go, relatively slow. Um, yeah, and ultimately we all kind of took turns helping each other out. We had some additional help from some of Josh's Houston friends, which was basically a fellow CMC and racer and somebody that he works with over at NASA. And then one of his friends from actually Plano came down for the race as well.
Yeah, I think Chad and Richard maybe. But
yes,
yeah, they're a huge help. Yeah,
yeah.
big shout out to those guys.
And then of course we had Eric there as well.
Yeah.
Jumping in where needed on pit stops, which was, you can never have too many people on a pit stop, or at least that's my belief. I'm sure there's probably a line after double digits. Maybe that's too many, but regardless, pit stops went well. Nothing to
Yeah,
really
Eric running fuel. Yeah, it was a lot
Yeah.
different experience than the BMW.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
factory fuel system on the 929, especially with the chugs that we had, was like about a 7 or 8 minute of the pit stop was solely just putting fuel into the actual car. It was
It's a
slow.
relaxing experience. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, especially
Yeah,
when
you
have your
know
bike.
the real problem usually isn't getting the fuel in; it's getting the air out. Like that's the toughest part on a factory system. It just isn't made to
Yeah, we might look into the venting on that system, see if there's something we can modify to,
or at least clear out. I mean, you can't really modify it, right? Because if it's a factory system, it has to remain a factory system from, start to end. Or once it's modified, then it's outside the rules. But like if you've got a charcoal canister in there or something like that, you might look at maybe if that thing's all clogged up or something like that, or any kind of restriction in that system that may have a deposit that you could clean out.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the charcoal system on the car in the many trips into the trunk, so I don't know. Definitely something to put a pin in and dig into a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Yeah, so had some pretty good laps there. I mean, Todd did really well, I feel like. We had a lot of weather. Did you get to drive in the rain? That first stint?
I'm not gonna lie. My experience in driving in the rain on a track is not as. I think only one of my DE days did we ever see rain, and after like one full stint with an instructor, there was lightning, so they shut it all down. Which haven't had as much experience as I would have liked, but I was at least lucky in the sense that the rain was for y'all's stints, not necessarily ours. One thing that I am now remembering, we had some fun with the windshield wipers.
Yeah.
I think that was something that we had to fix Saturday night for sure.
Yeah, I during my stint at least, and I think it may have happened to Todd, the windshield wipers worked. It was great, and the window was very how you say, what's the stuff you wipe on the window? The Rain-X, right?
Rain-X,
the Rain-X was set up and it was working just fine. But as soon as it started raining in my stint, I go to hit the wipers, and the left wiper just flies off the windshield, and I've got to go grab it and put it back onto the windshield, on the back straight.
Like it tried to completely depart the chat.
Yeah, it was like, I'm out, guys. So
freedom.
Yeah, so I did about an hour, maybe hour 20, no wipers in the rain.
Oh man,
it was a real blast, honestly. The Rain-X does the job.
Yep. If you're going fast enough.
Yeah, and I think it was also starting to get a little dark, if I remember. I just remember having to really keep an eye on brake lights or something. And it was kind of that weird beach rain where it would come and go. It'd be raining on half the track and dry on the other half.
Man,
it was constantly changing conditions. It was a lot of fun. It was a really fun challenge. I don't think I really got the lap times I wanted, but I feel like it was, respectable for the weather conditions we were in. And I think we were running a little bit better pace than some of the other guys around us. And I really think by the time my stint got there, we were up to the top three. I mean, we were fighting, right? And I think we were battling against this Volkswagen Jetta, so it's a ton of fun. I don't know, am I skipping ahead too much yet, Chris, or is that any other thoughts? Yeah. And then Josh got in the car. I think Josh is the only. Yeah, what you got, Pat?
How is so I've noticed over the years. I don't want to put that on anyone else. Over the years, it seems like we've seen kind of a steady deterioration of the condition of the track surface at Houston. I mean, the other facilities have seen deterioration too, but a lot of that's been storm based. How was the track surface itself at Houston this year?
Well, they filled the pothole that did us in last year. So going into Diamond's Edge, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that's at least been repaired. The general buildings and stuff like that. Yeah, it seems to be in a steady state, maybe, I guess. Yeah. The garage seemed like it was kind of falling apart, no lights and stuff like that. But
same as last year. They haven't done a resurface on the track, have they?
No.
Yeah. That's what they're gonna need to do that, or that place is gonna be done in 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I did find the limit of that. There's that weird fake curb on the last corner there that you can completely ignore the curb for 50 feet.
Right.
And it's just, flush with the ground.
Yeah.
Well, I found, I found the limit to that, right? Don't go a full additional car length into that, right? It turns into a real curve all of a sudden. So,
on carousel?
Yeah, like coming out of carousel into the front straight. We did. There was a red flag at some point. This young 944 driver got flipped. And I remember it was so weird because I saw that kid and I was like, man, that kid's young, and he was like in line, ready to go out on track, and then like I think that was during your stint, wasn't it, Chris? You had to come in for that red flag.
Yeah, we were. I was sitting right after launch. There was a couple of us basically back in the S's, and we had, well, me and the car in front of me, both of us, I could see both of us were just looking out in the mirrors, and we didn't see the car on its roof, but there was another 944. I think it was a black one that had basically just died on track, and they left it out there for at least 2 of my laps, but it was right before the track entrance. And I had assumed, I was like, oh, I guess they shut down the track to finally get that car, so they didn't have to do a full lap with the safety trucks. And I was just sitting out there for a while, toggling the cool suit on and off, just so I wasn't baking alive. And then when I came in, y'all were like, "Did you see the car on the roof?" And I was like, "The 944, like the one that was on its wheels over there." And you guys were like, "No, it's the other 944." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, they
all smashed up."
Yeah.
Yeah, that wall, I mean, if you talk about like problems with the track pad, that wall has claimed a lot of cars. I mean, there were like 4 or 5 red flags last year at the race.
At the tire wall?
Yeah, at the same spot. Yeah.
Yeah, but just think if it wasn't there.
Well,
I mean,
I'm just saying,
you'd have guys going into the hard wall.
Sure, I'm just saying the geometry of the track in general. I'm not.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of that goes back to that track was originally designed to go counterclockwise, and we always run it clockwise, and nearly everyone does. But it was originally designed to go counterclockwise, and then they realized that the problem is that as you come through, what is what do they call turn 1 and 2? Sugar, yeah. So if you're coming through that the other way around and you get it wrong, you T-bone into the pit wall. So whoever, I'm guessing that wasn't a Tilke F1 design track, right? It was somebody came up with this on a napkin and thought, hey, this is a great idea. So between the two options, right, a tire wall there that eats cars, or a T-bone into the nose of your car.
I've seen 30. I've seen 30 Spec Miatas getting wadded up going clockwise.
Oh yeah, we've seen that plenty of times, right? Like, somebody gets too wide there and it clips their right front fender, but they're at the front of a pack.
Yeah, and
it's just gonna be carnage. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay. So that was my stint, and then Josh. Sorry, I was looking at the chats. Then Josh got in the car, and Josh was running really good laps. He was super fast, and I think it was going to be tough to be on pace to be in first place, but we were holding steady, third and second. But then he ran into a bit of a problem, huh, Chris? You want to talk about the brakes and stuff? Or was it fuel and brakes? It was all kinds of problems at the end there.
Yeah. We definitely started to learn the limits of how much fuel. The fuel gauge in that car always reads a little bit high. And ultimately, we were kind of toying around. The car's supposed to have an 18.5 gallon tank from factory. How much it actually holds, again, who knows?
There's no way to know.
Yeah, and especially with the gauge always reading a little bit high, like you can pour gas into it until it burps, and the gauge will it'll say it's full until maybe an hour into the first stint, which isn't really accurate. But in efforts to try and combat the TDI VW that we were fighting for first in Class C, we thought on one of our pit stops, well, it's taking too long to put 2 fuel jugs in, and to be honest, you're not even really putting the full second fuel jug in because it kind of burps towards the end. So I believe I think it wasn't Matt's pit stop. I think it was on Josh's pit stop. We only put 1 jug in instead of the normal 2 that we put, which apparently was just the perfect storm. I guess his foot is a little bit heavier than the rest of ours, and he had a little bit drier of a track. But he finally learned where the car starts to surge, which is apparently you put him behind the wheel for just long enough with only 1 jug to refuel it, and towards the end of the day, and it is just enough where I believe he ended up having to come in for us to just put one additional jug in, which is mildly annoying for him just because he has to get out of the car just for us to refuel. But I understand safety, and that was a spot where we lost. We ended up losing a lap or two from second place, or further into second place, while we had to do that. But I think towards the end of Saturday, I think it was like about 5 or 6 laps down from the Jetta, and we were still, I think, 2 or 3 laps ahead of third place in C-Class, which we ended up keeping that lead with regards to taking the checkered, even with that extra fuel stop, just to put some gas in there. And he also was having to baby the brakes, which ultimately we learned that changing your brake fluid is important.
Yeah, so he started like calling in a real long pedal there towards the end of his stint, and you know, so he started to just manage it, and he did a great job of managing it. I think he even ran his fastest lap after it was like right after we got on the fuel. I think he went back out and he had no brakes, and he just needed to like do 3 or 4 more laps, and he ran his fastest lap, which was the fastest lap of the team, and then. Yeah, we brought that car in, and it's kind of like the ABS on the BMW, Pat. If the ABS is disabled, all the power goes to the rear, and it had just worn through those puny little rear brake pads.
Yeah.
And the car, and looking back on it, is like, oh yeah, this thing does stop like a go-kart, right? It's like the rear locks up going into sugar and spice, and you have to kind of like just drag it through the corner. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so he got metal to metal, boiled the fluid, and then there was a whole bunch of other just crap in that fluid. But we got right to it and swapped out the brake fluid and swapped out the pads. And what'd you have to do, a rotor too?
We did end up putting one rotor in the rear. When I was in there messing around with the whole rear end, I didn't want to chance it, so we did rear pads and rotors. Of course, they one of the calipers was biting just a little bit more, and the metal to metal really, you could tell it was heat cycled. Looked like one of those cool titanium exhausts you buy on Amazon, where it was all blue and orange, which is not what you want for your factory brakes on your Mazda 929. So yeah, it was impressive that he stopped.
Good on you for having all those spares around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nice work. So that was, I mean, I think that was about all we had to do Saturday night, right? I think there was a potluck, and did we have to work on anything else on the car? I think it was.
We did some minor just inspection of the car. Like at one point, I did forget about my black flag. How could I?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was the sole black flag for contact of the weekend. We ended up getting, not to spoil anything, we ended up getting a couple on Sunday for other things, nothing driver related, but on Saturday I was our sole black flag, which to be honest, there was a tire mark on our fender, and supposedly the big station wagon that was blue and orange, I guess at some point tapped us or hit us to where one of the corner workers saw it and they called us in, and I wasn't entirely sure what I got called in for, but it was definitely one of those moments where they said they were like, Mazda 929 responsible for hitting another car. They clearly weren't the aggressors there, but there was a tire mark, and then we did have another little.
And you weren't able to like pawn it off when you got to like back to the penalty box. Like, it's that other 929 out there. They're calling us in fake.
That's a good one. We definitely got to add that to the toolbox. No, we got in there, and
what you have. That's why you need a Dymo label printer. You can put it right on the center console.
Yeah, I ended up. I was going a little fast in the paddock, so Bob had to chat with me for a few moments of just, hey, bud, come on, what are you doing? But yeah, we had that, and then later in the day, which was one of the other things we were taking a look at Saturday night, was towards the backside of the track. There was a newer driver who was in front of Todd. They waved a yellow flag, and the newer driver stopped entirely on the track. So Todd, of course, not wanting to cause an accident, gets on his brakes to not hit the car. Well, there was a E30 behind us that I guess didn't see the brake light on the 929 or was just too close, and locked up their brakes and hit the back of the 929, which ultimately didn't get called in. However, our car, you couldn't even tell anything was wrong with it. There was just a new hole from the tow hook on the E30. Now their car, they did have to fix because apparently the whole bumper got pushed in a little bit. The radiator was but the best part was, or I guess the worst part was, they had gotten hit just enough where the motor mounts shifted and the transmission no longer aligned up, so they had to get towed in off track. Yeah, we found this all out at the potluck because we didn't really hear a whole lot about it. Todd was like, "Yeah, I think somebody may have bumped me out there. Wasn't anything too crazy." And then we ended up meeting the people that had apparently given him a little love tap, and apparently their car did not fare too well against the behemoth of the 929, which that's one additional feather in its cap.
That'll learn them.
Those 90s dentists were safe. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it did wreck that poor E30. I feel bad. And
do you think that was was that the target market for the 929 originally?
Totally.
The dentist?
Yeah. It was the guys that, it was like they would track their search history. They'd go to like Lexus.com, and then they'd go to bankofamerica.com, and then they'd be like, search alternative for Lexus, and then there you go. The Mazda 929.
You think that's it? It's the dentist, it's the fifth dentist, the guy that doesn't endorse Crest toothpaste, and it's the same guy that he's like, none of this Lexus BS. I want to be a real rebel. I'm going to go with a 929.
Yeah. He's like, is like, he's got an independent dentistry, and he's like, I'm not going to sell out to those corporate thieves.
At Toyota. This is all before they acquiesce to their eventual Porsche-ness, right?
Yeah. All right. We digress. So
I don't like being called a digression. I'd like for you to take that back, sir.
Sorry, Pat. We always appreciate your commentary and understanding. And if you want to know more about the 929, let's give a shout out.
I appreciate the devolution from being a digression to pure patronism. So thank you.
Yeah. But if you want to know more about the 929, there was a video that Lemons did, just making Chris even more Lemons famous. He got a full feature-length video for his 929. So congratulations on that. How many times has it been viewed? Do we know?
I've personally sent it around the office at least half a dozen times. Anytime somebody's like, I got a new car, and I was like, did you get a 929? And then I'll just shamelessly plug the video.
Nice. Just inserting your commentary. I love it. All right. I'm going to try to pull this video up real quick just because I want to see how many views it has. Anyway, all right, moving on. So I think, does that pretty much cover Saturday then? We're up in second place.
Yeah, I think the only thing that had developed at that point was we also realized that the exhaust leak had become a little bit louder. Still attached to the car, but a little bit louder. I was foreshadowing a little bit.
Foreshadowing, nice. Yes, you're a great storyteller, Chris. We appreciate this. So 4,000 views, Chris. That's how many times your video has been viewed. So congratulations. Wow. That's impressive. That many more people know about the 929 race car. So then Sunday, we'd had the same driver lineup, I think. But there was a caveat. Saturday night, I got woken up at 2 a.m. by my wife, who was freaked out about a tornado that was about to hit our house. And then poor Eric Strawn got the same call, and he did indeed have some damage. So that set us on an odd trajectory going into Saturday morning, because Mr. Strawn needed to get back to the city to put his house back together. And I begged and pleaded that we just leave because I respect Eric Strawn and his property. But he said, no, why don't you try to get the first stint in? So they sent me out first, and it was
I'm going to interrupt you. Eric Strawn is a righteous dude. Like
Eric Strawn is the best person on the earth.
And I know you don't mean to say it. You're not meaning to imply any other way from that. But I just out there, Eric Strawn is a righteous dude.
He is a righteous dude. Yeah. No. If you're ever worried about humanity, just spend a weekend with Eric Strawn, and you'll be like, oh, okay, there are good people out there.
I mean, you do have to look past the hair choice.
There's nothing wrong with the hair choice.
It's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I mean, it is a choice, But if I don't give Eric Strawn a hard time about his hair choice, he wouldn't respect me anymore. It's the same thing I say to him in person. So this isn't anything, like behind the back or anything. In fact, when he hears this tomorrow at 9 a.m. when he downloads this, he'll probably be laughing at it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're the best. Yeah, you're the best, Eric. All right.
Except for your hair choice.
Yeah. So I got to hop in the car, and it was another rainy session, very rainy. And then as it was starting to dry off, I started to, I feel like pick up my pace a little bit. I was starting to feel good in the car. And then all of a sudden I go into sugar and spice, and I hear clackle, 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 clackle. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. And so sure enough, the exhaust had fallen off. And so I called that in. I said, guys, I think the exhaust has fallen off. And then one lap later, going into sugar and spice, and all of a sudden the whole car's like, brrrr. I'm like, oh yeah, no, the exhaust has definitely fallen off now. And it started to give me, that nice exhaust leak high into the cabin, and I went ahead and just kept driving it. I think I got a couple more laps in before they black flagged us, but whatever. We gave it the old college try. And at that point, Eric and I had to hightail it out of there. But Chris, I think you guys spent the next hour or so trying to weld the exhaust back onto the hot exhaust.
Yes, yeah, that is one thing that I've since added to my spare parts bin with the 929 is random exhaust pieces, because from last year we had one right angle bend, we had a piece of flex tube, which is like the worst thing that you could possibly use. Apparently you can weld it, as we later learned. And then we had a couple of the sheet pieces and a couple clamps. It was for sure a very kludgy system, but it was one of those things where for Lemons the exhaust has to leave after the driver, so we had to make the most out of the pieces that we had, which was a puzzle, and we never got the original section of exhaust back off track until the end of the day, so we didn't have a long straight piece. So it was a mix of right angle flex tube, one straight piece, which I will say, when you are frantically walking around looking for metal pieces to cobble together for your exhaust, and you go to the track shop, word to the wise, make sure to not get a piece of aluminum, because aluminum cannot be welded to steel. I didn't realize it was aluminum until I got back, and somebody points to it and says, isn't that, I think it was like 6160 or whatever, and he's like, isn't that aluminum? And I'm just like, yeah, we can't weld that, can we? So we had to use this.
You could clamp it.
That's what we ended up doing, was we drilled holes through, and
nice.
we double twisted baling wire to make thicker baling wire, drilled a hole through the exhaust, of course, after the driver, so that the aluminum piece couldn't slide off and go into the oblivion. At which point we had a cobbled together exhaust. The problem was we had used these giant clamps, and there was no way to orientate the clamp where the clamp wasn't aimed down to the ground, because alternatively the exhaust is an inch or two lower because the clamp is now hitting the bottom of the car. So we were able to convince the nice gentleman at Tech, or I guess the nice safety person at Tech, who re-teched the car and said, I don't think this is going to last more than a lap or two. And he knew his stuff, because as soon as I pulled out on track entrance, I said, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the exhaust is already dragging. At which point I made it one full lap of the track, immediately came in, and we brought it back in the garage for version 2 of the exhaust, which that's when we pulled out the Harbor Freight booger welder, the Flux Core Titanium 110, and just started welding everything to everything so that nothing needed clamps, it worked pretty well for the welded pieces, but there were some other parts that didn't really work too well, like the parts where it was aluminum into steel, where we had to use clamps and what was thicker tin foil. But V2 of the exhaust was better. We were able to put Todd back out on track, and I think he was able to do, I would say, probably about a 30 to 45 minute stint with that exhaust before the flex tube piece where it was connected up with aluminum finally decided it no longer wanted to be clamped and just came apart. At which point we got another black flag to come in and fix the exhaust, which at that point, when we were fixing the exhaust, we ended up acquiring a long straight steel piece, which was chromed, which is exactly what you want to weld to your cobbled together exhaust. And that was V3 of the exhaust, which that exhaust lasted us the rest of the day. Now, after with like the version 3 of the exhaust, which at this point, I think we were already down in like 6th or 7th in C class. Like we had no hopes of taking the C class victory. Once we had the exhaust kind of cobbled back together, the decision was made to kind of put me back in the car since, well, actually, I think Todd maybe went out for maybe a little bit more of a stint, and then I got back in the car for another hour or so before we put Josh in for another hour or so, because it was about that 1 o'clock point where it's like, well, we have 3 hours and we've got 3 drivers.
You're just getting some track time at this point.
Exactly. And I will say, I don't know what all clicked for me at least, but when I went out there with the car, it was one of those moments, like, I don't want to say it's like surreal or like out of body experience, but like something just clicked where you're just out there and you're like, oh, I can actually kind of visualize the line and I can carry a whole lot more speed. The reason I say this is from Saturday to Sunday, nothing really had changed on the car, but somehow I magically found 10 seconds of lap time, which
Nice.
like,
wow,
yeah, that's
impressive.
Yeah, when they told me like my fastest lap on, I think on Sunday was like a 2:15 or 2:16, I was like, where did that come from? Like that's still like 10 seconds off pace from some of you faster guys, but at the same time, in the 929 with not a whole lot of experience, I had somehow
great.
That was very good pace actually. I think our fastest. I don't know what Josh got later on Sunday, but yeah, before that was like a 2:10.
Yeah, you guys, I will say I was blessed the entire weekend that it always seemed like whatever moments I was out on track, the rain stopped, or the rain at least the clear pinhole of sunlight just followed me around track. Everyone else had rain because I didn't really have too much wet conditions, but we did tighten down the wiper so we could use it on Sunday if needed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of those moments where like I got out of the car and I felt accomplished, which I will say it was probably the bittersweet point because after me, Josh was our last driver to finish us up with the last hour of the race, and I will say I had stepped away for the moment where it happened, but coming out of carousel, I think it was his second, maybe first lap out there. Unfortunately, car spun out in carousel, which in chatting with the previous owner, apparently it likes to do a lot. Especially when you carry speed into carousel, which if you're trying to push it, that's what you have to do. But when he was getting back out on track, there was a Jetta. I think our car is cursed with any Volkswagen product that comes close to it or ends up in C class with us. But he got struck by a Jetta when he was coming out because he couldn't really see where exactly they were, and that was kind of the end of our race on Sunday. But ended up having a small fire on the 929. I think it started with the exhaust, and then once the fire kind of got to the back of the engine, it burned up one of the fuel lines and just dumped a whole bunch of fuel on there. The motor, surprisingly, after replacing those fuel lines, did fire right up, which is kind of surprising. However, he was able to get out of the car. Other driver in the white Jetta was able to get out of the car, and we all just kind of watched in horror as they kept bringing more and more fire extinguishers out.
I didn't know the car caught fire. I guess maybe I missed that. Like I know you got T-boned coming back on track, but
yeah, apparently. So that's the interesting.
Only a little on fire.
Yeah. Like the car still turns on. It just got a little hot. There's a couple wires on the back of the engine which definitely got burned up. There was, of course, the fuel line that was melted into two pieces, and like a vacuum hose for the brake booster. That's why we had no brakes after the fire. Was the vacuum hose to the brake booster was non-existent. But that was the car ended up getting carted in on the trailer. Josh was okay, and that was kind of where our weekend ended with the car. But the important thing was the 929, the safety belts, the cage that was in that car. Josh was able to get out of the car in a quick time, and ultimately was not seriously injured. The hit that car took was very significant. It wasn't as noticeable on the 929, but when you saw the Jetta that hit us,
Oh, that Jetta's toast.
yeah, the entire dash was folded. The roof had a giant kink in the middle of it. The cage alone was like, you just looked at it and you were like, that was some serious force, which ultimately what those two cars went through, the fact that our car was able to at least roll, like stands a testament to
Thing's a tank.
the 929's build quality for sure.
Nice. Well, we're getting a little long in the tooth here on this episode, but I do want to kind of hear about what you found out since then. I think you've had a weekend to kind of take a look at the cars. So, do you think it's salvageable, or are you going to go get a Mustang, or where are we at now?
So the tentative plan is, well, really, I'm just waiting to hear back from John Pagel, head safety guy at Lemons. I sent him a couple shots of the 929. The door bars are completely straight. The front loop, or I guess the big loop that goes from front to back, the front bar, whatever you want to call it, also straight. But basically, all of the unibody outside of where the cage is pretty pressed in. Where I ended up having to cut the door off, but I was able to save the latch on there. Surprisingly, I found a 929 door at a junkyard not too far away. It's about 30 miles away, but I want to get the green light that the car could be saved before I spend any money on the door. The fender could be fixed. Surprisingly, the suspension components, I did take the wheel off. The wheel finally came off because that wheel was fighting us a little bit, but the wheel came off and the suspension components in the left front of the car are all intact, which makes logically no sense. And to be honest, I may just err on the side of precaution and replace a whole bunch of them. But at the same time, if we get the green light where the subframe can, or not subframe, the unibody can be kind of pulled out and reinforced, I was doing a little digging because the hit was right behind the rear wheel, right in front of or right at the A pillar. They have these reinforcement bars called fender bars that a ton of cars run if they've got weak frames and unibodies and stuff, which maybe that may be the route of just some added security if the 929.
I mean, Miatas run those just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Because,
I think that was the picture I had sent over, was like of a Miata with those fender bars, because it kind of would tie in exactly where the car needs to be tied in, just for that added level of safety.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, I like the approach. You're taking your time trying to figure out what you're going to do there. Are you kind of just targeting Houston again next year, or you want to do some other events?
So one thing I had kind of left off with last year was, at one point we wanted to pull the drivetrain out of the 929, and to be honest, if we're going to have to do a lot of body work to the car, it's one of those things where it may be worth trying to swap.
While you're in there, swap in a K24. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah, while we're in there, Vortec V6, or if I'm feeling extra masochistic, may even go with a 2.3 liter Duratec out of a newer Mazda or Ford Ranger, because you got to keep it Mazda. But yeah, I will say those engines don't really have torque. But the goal, if we get the green light to fix it, would be to shoot for Hallett, which I think is doable. That's probably our next closest race. I think Barber's just too soon. Even if we were to try and cage a car before Barber, wouldn't happen. Hallett would probably be next one actually on the radar for us.
Cool.
Do you think that's a real phrase, like in the parlance of humanity? Got to keep it Mazda.
If it's not, it should be.
Tell us the name of the team. We didn't talk about the team, because we've got Tarp Racing, and you've got a similarly like obtuse racing name. So what is the team name?
Yeah, so we are SIMP Motorsports, SIMP. We are the suckers idolizing Mazda projects, because I bought a Mazda before I bought the 929 that I was going to make a Lemons car, which they put in the... If you watch the 929 video, it makes a cameo for all of one slide. Had a nice airbrush flame paint job, ended up getting wrecked. So when the 929 came up, we just kept going Mazda, and at this point I've got the wife on board where she says in the next year or so, when she gets a new car, her Mazda CX-5 with about 200,000 miles that has body damage on every panel, which I did go ahead and get an appraisal at about $1,500. We sell some parts off of that, and boom, we could have a Mazda tow vehicle that is also caged to run in Lemons as well.
Let me just tell you, nobody is going to give you an ounce of trouble over being $1,000 over budget on Mazda SUV CUV entered in lemons. Like you
They
don't
look
need to
sexy
you don't need
slam
to,
too.
yeah, you don't need to sell a thing off of that to worry about like making it into the race without laps.
Pat knows people. We got you. We got your back.
You don't even for that. You don't even need like street cred. Like you show up at a Mazda CUV that you've caged. It's like if like you could probably even drop an LS in that, and they wouldn't like give you laps. They just put you in Class A. Like we appreciate the ingenuity, sir.
Yeah, I think the only kicker on that car is she didn't have heat last year, and those Mazdas apparently they have very thin tubing in the heater core, so the silicone in the engine clogs it up after X number of miles. So me being a thoughtful husband replaced the heater core in that car last year, which was a fun process.
It always is.
Which would be mildly ironic if we ended up running it in lemons. I think we may just keep the defroster for the sole fact of I'm very proud of the heater core repair, and I'm honestly a little disappointed if we have to rip it all out for lemons.
Nice.
Heck yeah.
No, I mean those, we've learned. I think you pull all that crap out of your car, and then you realize like, man, it would be nice to have some creature comforts in here. So yeah,
especially the defroster. I mean, at Road Atlanta 2017 when we're there on Friday and it starts snowing and we're like, what on earth, right? Like this is Atlanta, and it's like, we get like a snowstorm once a year. Here it is. And all day Saturday it was like double yellows pretty much all day Saturday. It was a single track.
Yeah,
so I endorse for lemons. I wholly endorse keep that heater core. Plus, if I say if, but really it's when you start having an overheating issue. It's a second radiator. Saves your engine.
Yep. Good point. I like it. Well, this is all great stuff. I love the plans for the future. I love the race. I had a great time, Chris. I think we run a good team. You got Todd there kind of doing his thing. He's a seasoned racer by this point, and he's got some good pace. And he was staying in his new to him, I want to say like 28-foot trailer, and that thing is nice, man. Like he's got a mini split on it and bunk beds inside, or not bunk beds, but cots.
Oh yeah, you lived there in comfort, didn't you?
I didn't stay in. No, I stayed in my truck.
No?
Yeah, I just stayed in the front seat of the Expedition, and that was very comfortable. But yeah, boring. I know. Cuddling with Todd would have been a more exciting story, but
Todd and I were roommates for 2 years. You're not telling me anything I don't already know.
Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff. Anything else we need to cover, Chris? Do you think we did a good job explaining the race?
Yeah. I think the only I don't want to say it's a curse, but I feel like our 929 is plagued with Volkswagens in C-Class, because last year we lost to a C-Class diesel Beetle, and then this year was we were fighting with a Jetta, and unfortunately got clipped by another Jetta. So I think Volkswagen and Mazda 929s don't mix.
I like this fight. I think we should keep it up. Maybe upside down Volkswagen logos all over the car next time. It's great. All right, any shout outs for the listeners, for the 100 billion listeners? No? Pat, any shout outs?
I am shout out free right now. If we get the BMW working, I will have a definite shout out to a harness supplier that I'm trying to work with right now.
All right. It's exciting. Got lots of shout outs. Well, I don't have much myself. Check out racershq.com. Chris, do you have any real quick parting moments? Any songs that are getting you hype right now? What did you listen to on the way to the track on Saturday morning?
So I found it's not a podcast, but it's, I guess, a playlist, or it's a mix. There's a DJ group called Two Friends, and they have these mixes where it's literally like an hour and a half, and they just keep merging songs, and it's only like 30 seconds of each song merging into another song, and it's one of those things where like you can just put it on and you're like, oh yeah, that's I would say what I would say if you got some. I think they're called the Big Booty mixes.
Yeah,
that's just what they're called on
check
Spotify.
It
out. But they very interesting for sure.
Wasn't that your career path at one point, Matt Murphy?
Yeah. But I was gonna say that it sounds like Girl Talk. Girl Talk was the band that had, it was like Def Leppard and Outkast or something mashed together, and it was pretty entertaining. Yeah. But no, at one point I wanted to be a hip hop MC, but I digress. Racing is much more fun. Racing with your buddies is way more fun than being a hip hopster.
It'd be even better if we could work math into it.
Oh yeah, math. Well, we work math into the racing all the time. Chris tried to work math into fuel strategies, and look where that got him. But I did the exact same thing at Hallett, though, Chris. So no harm, no foul. Oh, thank you.
That's right.
So the music we're talking about, the mashup, is in the chats. So go check that out on the public channel. Thank you, Chris. We'll get that added to the Racers HQ playlist. Great. Well, let's wrap it up. Like and subscribe, rate and review. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Apple Music or Spotify. Check us out at racershq.com. I think we got a couple more shows until the end of the year, so we're gonna have to pick like a racer of the year and probably talk about who wins the F1 Fantasy League champion ship and all those things. If you're in Oklahoma City for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, come check us out. We are going to be hanging out at Sauced on Paseo. We got the whole bar private party. I think there's an event on Facebook.
So that's exciting.
We're throwing down for the Las Vegas Grand Prix on Saturday night at midnight. So check us out. All right. I kind of forget. Oh, yeah. Like and subscribe, rate, and review. See you at the track. Bye, everybody.
Au revoir. Night, Dave.